G'day everyone, welcome back to the channel. So today we're going to talk about how to fix tight hamstrings. Now, as most people know, tight hamstrings are pretty common. A lot of people feel like they have tight hamstrings, and we always feel like we're forever having to stretch them without ever really making some constant gains over time. So what we're going to do in this video is we're going to break it up into two parts. And the first part, I'm going to talk about why your hamstrings are tight in the first place, which is a fundamental concept to understand if we're then going to go through the second half of the video, which is how to mobilize those tight hamstrings, how to free up those tight hamstrings. So we're going to go through a couple of ideas that you may not necessarily have thought of, but clinically as physical therapists, they are crucial if you want those hamstrings to normalize and to be loose again. And before we get into the video, one thing that's important to say right from the start is it's really unlikely that you are someone who just has tight hamstrings. It's very easy to feel like that. A lot of people have had tight hamstrings for as long as they can remember, which often leads them to feel like that's just who they are as a person. They're someone with tight hamstrings. But as we start talking about the reasons why a hamstring becomes tight, hopefully you'll understand that there is more to it than bad luck and genetics and things like that. There's some genuine things that you can control and need to control if you want those hamstrings to free up over time and stay free. So the first thing we want to talk about is, why are your hamstrings tight? What has brought you to this point where you're watching a video on how to free up tight hamstrings? And one of the things that I tell a lot of patients is we've got to stop thinking about hamstring tightness as a hamstring problem. Yes, the hamstring is the thing that's tight, but it is a symptom of something else. And it's that something else which is fundamentally important to solving these problems. So what we want to look at is, a tight hamstring is a signal that there's something going on with your lower back. Now that might sound a bit strange to a lot of people because they often feel like different, disparate sections of the body, but they're genuinely connected by a number of things. Now, the reason why we want to think of all hamstring complaints, whether it's constant hamstring injuries or just tight hamstrings in general, is that your body will recruit your hamstrings to help a dysfunctional lower back. And your back doesn't have to be sore, but we're talking about lower back tightness, lower back stiffness, increased neural tension, decreased stability. These are the things that your nervous system notices a lack of ideal function in your spine, and it draws function from areas around that to try and help sort of make up for that dysfunction. So for a lot of people, the two most common reasons why a hamstring becomes tight is because your back is stiff, or because your back is deactivated, or the muscles in your back, your core muscles, aren't activating and stabilizing to create a stable, strong platform for the rest of your body to function from. So we want to look at hamstring tightness as your body's choice. It's prioritized the function of your back, trying to optimize the function of your back by recruiting the hamstrings. The same thing happens with quads, it can happen with glutes, groin muscles. All of these tightnesses are generally a symptom of something more central in your spine. So we want to make sure we're looking at that and addressing that. And hopefully we can see this. So what we're going to go through first is, I'm just going to show you two quick tests to gauge how your hamstring tightness feels. And we're going to do some lower back exercises, and then we're going to come back and recheck those movements to make sure that we're seeing a change. And hopefully you can see, even in this short space of time, how much impact improving the function of your back can have on the flexibility or the available range of your hamstrings. So the first test, it's just a basic straight leg raise. So what I'm going to get you to do, and please feel free to do this and follow along at home, is I'm going to get you to lie down flat, and if you can bend one leg up to about 90 degrees or far enough up so that you can hold onto that thigh, with the other leg flat. Now we're going to point your toes back. We're bending your ankle, so we're basically tensioning up that part of the system. And all I'm going to get you to do is just straighten your leg as far as you feel comfortable. Now for me, I don't feel like I'm quite at 180 degrees there, but normal range of motion should be straight up and down, 180 degrees from this position. So if we compare that to the other side, again, same position, bend that foot back, bend that leg up. To me, this side feels a little bit tighter, which from what I know about my body makes sense. But again, take a mental image of this. So for you, what I'll get you to do is, when you're in this position and your foot's bent back, I'm going to get you to look at your toes and have a look at where on the roof that gets to. So that when you come up again afterwards, we want to make sure that you can see that that's gone back further than before. And the second test that we want to get you to do is just back as a simple one that everyone's probably done before, is just standing up, your feet shoulder width apart, and just bending down as far as you feel comfortable. Now for me, I'm somewhat fortunate, I can get my palms on the ground, but even for me, what I'm looking for is I'm trying to get a sense of how tight or the quality of this shape and how this feels for me. And again, we want to make sure that we see a change in a little bit. So with those two things, take a mental image of how that feels, and then obviously a visual, even for this video, of how that looked for me. And we're going to do a couple of exercises and come back to that. So the first exercise that's going to take a step towards fixing your hamstring tightness is you want to mobilize that lower back. Now, again, you can do this a number of ways, but for me, what I really like to do is just grab a foam roller. And again, if you've been following these videos, you'll know that the way that we use a foam roller often isn't as advantageous as it could be. So what we want to do with this is we just want to place it in your lower back and then just recline back onto that position. So you can lift your bottom up if you need to. You can have some pillows under here if it feels more comfortable for you. But traditionally we think of rolling backwards and forwards. As it turns out, it's probably not the best way to make change. For this specific exercise, because we're trying to go after the stiffness in the joints, those joints are very specific segments in your spine. So if we're rolling up and down, we're sort of glossing over those joints, those segments. We're not necessarily getting that specific pressure through the joint to make it looser. So all I want to do is just move around until I feel like I hit a spot that feels a bit stiff. So for me, I can feel a little bit of tightness here. And again, you can roll yourself to one side, roll yourself to the other side, see which side biases that stiffness the best. And then we want to hang out here. So again, I'd like you to do this for 1 minute, 2 minutes. Put something on the TV, have your phone out, spend some time just letting the roller press into your spine. Once you feel like it's given a little bit, then just move it down a little bit or up a little bit, depending on where you feel you need that pressure. And then again, we want to hang out here. And again, once you've done that, move it around again. So for me, I generally feel a little bit stiff and tight, sort of in this area, over onto this side. So I'm just going to stay here for a couple of seconds, just so I can show you what it does. And then hopefully after this, we're going to recheck the two tests again, and hopefully you'll see that it goes a little bit further than what it did before, or at the very least, it feels freer and looser than before. So just after having done that, excuse me, came back down to this position again. So this was my tighter side. So again, same position again, bending the foot back, and what you'll hopefully see, and what I can feel here, is that it goes further than it did before. Now this doesn't necessarily mean that I've freed up my hamstrings, but what this does, this particular straight leg raise, is more of a neural tension exercise. So the limiting factor for me and for a lot of people doing this is the nerve being tight down the back of your leg. It pulls a lot of the slack out of that system. So by freeing up your lower back, you feed a lot more slack into the system, and your range of motion tends to increase. And then how that looks from a bending over perspective. So again, shoulder width apart, so I could get my palms down, but this time I feel like I've got a little bit more range of motion in the system than what I had before. So those hamstrings don't feel as tight, but the whole system is now freer. So I strongly urge you to give that a go yourself, just to see and feel how much change you can make by freeing up your lower back. Now, what this does is, by taking away some of that tight, stiff, dysfunctional tissue in the lower back, it takes away some of the need for your body to find extra stability and tightness from your hamstrings. So we're trying to free up your back to give your brain and nervous system permission to let your hamstrings go. So they don't have to be tight. Your body doesn't need them to be tight because it's functioning better. Excuse me. So the second part of this is we want to talk about stability, core stability. And it's a separate discussion point from core strength. A lot of people do planks, football exercises, which are fantastic to develop the raw strength and power of your trunk and your core muscles. But what we miss amongst that is your body's ability to activate when it's needed. So having a strong core and strong core muscles is fantastic, but it's almost sort of, it's not useless, but it's not as effective if your body doesn't use them when it's needed to. So what we find is, one of the other, how we can relate this to a specific test is, if I was to come back to this position and then just bend my leg up to here, and this time if I brace my spine, so if I put my fingers just inside of my hip bones, just gently breathe out and try and draw my belly button into my spine. If you've got your fingers in this position, you should feel like the muscles under that area begin to tense. So we're not squeezing the abs like we're going to do a sit-up, we're drawing those muscles in. And by maintaining that position, what I'll hopefully see here is, again, the same thing happens as before, is that leg goes a little bit further than it did before. So what's happened here is, by making sure that my spine is braced better, again, it gives my nervous system permission to let go of those hamstrings, because it's not trying to sort of prioritize that lower back function. So the second exercise that we need you to focus on is, apart from freeing up your lower back, we need you to practice activating and bracing those tummy muscles while you're doing things to reactivate that system, that process in your body, so you can give your hamstrings permission to let go. So what I recommend to a lot of people is, when you're sitting down watching TV, when you're walking around the house, just dig a finger inside those hip bones to the fleshy part, gently breathe out, and then just try and draw those tummy muscles, or draw that belly button in and up. And if you're doing that correctly, you should be able to draw that in and maintain that, and breathe over the top without feeling like those muscles let go. So how that looks basically is, we draw those tummy muscles in, and then you can breathe over the top of that. And we want to make sure that you feel competent and comfortable engaging those core muscles, so that when you're doing regular things throughout the day, you can just kick those muscles in, get them to work, retrain your brain to do that more often. And those two things together can hopefully help sort of change the priority that your body has placed on tightening up your hamstrings. So obviously, doing some core strength exercises like a plank, or some football exercises like a rollout, are still really helpful, and that'll definitely contribute to your hamstrings needing to be less tight. But we want to make sure that you're aware of the difference between activation and strength. We need those two things together, but they're two separate things that you need to work on, or at least prioritize on top of each other. So there are two really important aspects to this. The third aspect to this, which we also need to talk about, is, how does your back become stiff and tight and dysfunctional in the first place? We know as human beings, we're supposed to be strong, happy and healthy all the time. Mobility is something that we have from birth, but we tend to lose it as we get older, not because we get older, but because we often spend a lot of time sitting. Sitting is one of those things where it's a real passive activity to do. It's a passive shape and passive position, and it's something that takes the need to brace your spine naturally out of the equation. So what we find is, if someone's sitting and they slouch, however they slouch, they'll kick a hinge into their back somewhere. That hinge starts to get a bit stiff, above and below that gets stiff. But in this position, you're no longer relying on your musculature to prop you up like you would if you were sitting in a good position. You're basically hanging off the passive structures in your back. And over time, those structures will stiffen to meet that increased load. But again, what we don't realize is, a lot of the musculature in this area that normally helps brace that spine just doesn't get engaged. And then over time, it weakens and deactivates. So not only do we need to make sure that we're freeing up the back and re-engaging those spinal muscles, but we have to make sure that we're then putting it in a good position. Otherwise, that process is going to keep happening day after day, and we're not going to make progress. You're just going to go up and down on that wavelength, never really fixing anything. So we need those three things to be better if you want these hamstrings to free up for good. Now, the next part of this video is just making sure that you know how to stretch your hamstrings. And we won't actually spend too much time on this, even though this is a video on improving your hamstrings, because we shouldn't need to. If you can do one simple stretch, hamstring stretches are pretty basic for a lot of people, but a really simple version of this, you can do this in a number of ways. It's essentially making sure your back's straight and leaning over until you feel some tightness in your hamstrings. You might find it's easier if you had a seat, a chair, a bed, a couch, whatever, if you're standing up. For the purposes of this, I won't stand up, but So we want to get you basically to put your leg up on something. What I like to do with my patients is to have your knee bent first, back nice and straight, and then just straighten that leg until you feel some tightness in the belly of the muscle. If you're feeling tightness in the back of the knee, that's neural tightness, that's not a hamstring stretch. So make sure that you can position yourself to feel some tightness in the muscle belly. And what I'll get you to do here is gently draw those core muscles in like we said before, and from your hip, so don't bend forward from your back, but keeping your back nice and straight, hinging from your hip, you should be able to lean forward until you feel extra tension through that part of the muscle. So this makes sure that this is a hamstring stretch, not a nerve stretch or a back mobility exercise. But in this position, you want to take a deep breath in and then squeeze. So squeeze that hamstring, squeeze that glute, squeeze your quads if you need to, tense everything up for 5 to 10 seconds and then relax. You should feel like you've just given yourself a little bit of extra range to repeat this process. So deep breath in, squeeze, and relax. And again, you should feel like you can go a little bit further. So a simple hamstring stretch like that is fantastic. And then to tie this all in together, just having done this leg, we also want to make sure you make change. So being in this position again, just bringing my leg up, all of a sudden this just feels a lot less tight and glued down. It doesn't feel as, feels a lot looser and a lot softer. Hopefully it looks like it's going further on the video. And then to come back to this position, so same thing again, bending forward, seeing how far down we can get. It automatically feels like I'm down a lot lower than I was before. So I'll have to check the tape, but it did feel like it went a bit lower. So hopefully that's a really good rundown of how to fix your hamstring tightness, how to stretch those hamstrings. There's some ideas there that hopefully you haven't heard before, but they're really, really important, that you can't fix a hamstring problem if you're not addressing what's going on at your lower back. So let me know your thoughts below in the comments. I'd love to discuss this with you if you have any extra information, any extra questions, sorry. Please consider subscribing below. It'll let you know when new videos are posted, excuse me, and it just helps support the channel. So we're posting these daily videos, so hopefully you're getting something out of them. But until next time, we'll talk to you soon.